Just look at this little guy. So sweet, so innocent, so helpless, and the leader of a worldwide cult. Just recently, an irate friend posted an article called, "I think people without kids have empty lives, and I'm not sorry about it." The link is posted below. Yeah, I'm not joking. Just to start off with, I hate and have always hated when people say, if you haven't done X, you never really lived. Happiness doesn't work that way. Our brains in the end only care about serotonin and dopamine, and what triggers that is completely different for everyone. Some biological, some cultural, and some psychological reasons. Just because you really enjoy something doesn't mean that a person is missing out on happiness because they've never done it. Being in a group of people who like the same things you do builds camaraderie and feels good. And it's why there are sporting events and cons. But feeling everyone should like what you like is literally just childish. It's why so many straight people have been anti-gay for so long. They think that if they like the opposite sex, bullying gays for liking the same sex should make them like the opposite sex as well, and they can't fathom that all brains are different. Just like how everyone's nerves are different in picking up signals, why some can barely tolerate pain, while a masochist can find great pleasure from what the average person would consider torture and crimes against humanity. Hence why the golden rule is flawed. Others may not like what you would like done to you, done to them. But that's just scratching the surface of how horrible this argument and mindset is. It's the absolute worship of the baby. Babies evolved to be the most manipulative of creatures to make people want to care for it and help them out. No other species young is capable of making its non-parents care about it and want to care for it. In the great apes, a grandmother may care for the child, but the buck literally stops there. Except on that rare occasion, only the mother cares about their own offspring to ensure its genes get passed on. Humans evolved a different strategy, taking the social society to the extreme level, and basically everyone in the tribe cared for the baby to various degrees. That baby had probably some of your DNA if you were in a tribe of 50 to 150 people, so it was advantageous to help as many babies survive and thrive as possible. However, in the hunter-gatherer period, they had to be very aware of the population levels. An acre of land at least was needed to support one person, and they often had defined boundaries for their territory based on past confrontations, and infanticide and use of abortive herbs was incredibly common, as their lives depended on not starving. With agriculture, 10 people could live off of 1 acre, but with a lot less dietary variety, making them shorter and weaker. But 10 small, weak people still outnumber 1 strong person. After that point, the fear of overpopulation declined in the human mind. With less nutrition, their minds became more violent, and they found that if they didn't have enough land, they could go to war and expand into someone else's land, and that owning a lot of things was a good thing, and having a lot of children increased your chances of winning wars and subjugating people as slaves. Thanks to breeding livestock, they knew how sex worked, and that one man was responsible for the birth of a child, and began restricting women in power and sex to the point of being property so they could be certain that the child that inherited their stuff was definitely theirs. Kids were also your property until you died, and they would make you more powerful by working for you, and the more you had, the wealthier you were. Around the 1800s, the view on children began to change with the advent of automation. From the beginnings of feminism at Seneca Falls, to Karl Marx talking happily about destroying the family, to Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol discussing the innocence and goodness of children, the thoughts in America and Europe began to slowly shift about what it meant to be a child. Until that point in time, abortion was a normal thing and condoned by the church until a point called the quickening, where you could feel the baby kick. By the 1930s, child labor was banned in most Western nations, and free mandatory education was instituted. Children were now a separate class of people from the working class, something unheard of in human history. During the 1950s, the post-depression and post-war economy was booming. Children were raised even higher in social status, and the 2.5 kids, white picket fence, and a stay-at-home mother was the new American dream. Only if you were middle class, of course. Propagation of this ideal and social consensus was useful to get women to give up their higher-paying jobs they had during the war and go back to lower-paying jobs. Unlike the American myth, women working outside the home after the war actually rose by 5%, but their pay was less. 25% of women worked outside the home prior to the war, mostly the impoverished. The stay-at-home mom was mostly a white middle-class reality, and there were many negative side effects to stay-at-home mothers emotionally because of social and worth starvation. Alcohol and drug abuse among stay-at-home women was incredibly common. The sexual revolution arose and women suddenly had a lot more control and choice over if they had children at all. These women were looked down on as wanton harlots with loose morals for not doing the right thing by just finding a man and having children. The boomers gave birth to Gen X, who transitioned from hippies to materialistic yuppies and spent so much time working while leaving their kids alone, spawning the latchkey kids. Gen X in turn shifted their values and went the exact opposite direction, with parenting creating the helicopter parent. And it is with these parents and their now doting grandparents that the cult of baby became the strongest in human history. To a well-educated person who is economically, ethically, and environmentally conscious, the decision of whether or not and when to have a child is a very personal choice, with many complex calculations to analyze to give maximum benefit to the world, yourself, and ultimately the child. On top of this, you support and celebrate the decisions of your peers, who use the same informed decisions you did, as you know that the children they have will probably do well and benefit the world. People in the cult of the divine baby, on the other hand, blindly accept that having a child early is not only essential, but you shouldn't even question it. Socially, you will be pressured, because you will never be treated as a real adult until you have a child, and your opinion doesn't matter because you're not a parent. They will tell you condescendingly that you'll understand when you have kids, and even worse, they will parrot the phrase, "You'll never really be financially ready for kids," indicating, just do it without questioning when a human being's life is on the line. It will work out somehow. These are often the same people with completely uninformed opinions about poverty.